Attention, shoppers. The new Atari cartridge game is in.
Excuse me.
Uh-oh. George again.
Ooh, Atari's ASC battle.
It comes with 27 games, but that's just for starters. You can get 9 cartridges, 187 games.
Blackjack. Oh!
I'd like an Atari.
Sorry, only our demonstrators left.
Mine!
No, George. Mine.
The new video computer system by Atari. More games, more fun.
Are you tired of not being able to find a PS5 in stock anywhere? Does the Xbox One feel more like a number 2? Then you're ready to make the switch to the only console where an upgrade is a downgrade with the Atari 2600 VCS. The Atari 2600, otherwise known as VCS, short for Video Game Console, was developed by Nolan Bushnell and released in September of 1977. Although other game consoles did it first, like the Fairchild Channel F, the Atari 2600 popularized swappable game cartridges and took modern gaming as we know it out of the Stone Age and into your living room. Now, instead of just being paired to Pong, you could play games that had actual stories, characters, and objectives. From recognizable favorites like Frogger, Q*bert, and Pac-Man, the world of video games, for better or for worse, would never be the same. The 2600 originally came packaged with 2 single-button joysticks, 1 pair of paddle controllers, and the pack-in 2-player game Combat. The 2600 was a considerable powerhouse for its time, with a 1.19 MHz CPU and 128 bytes of RAM. Considering most game cartridges only had 2 kilobytes of RAM, the console truly pulled off some amazing feats in gaming for the time period. The system had a very successful life until the video game crash of 1983, mainly brought about by low-quality shovelware games like Pac-Man and E.T. that were underwhelming and either too confusing and frustrating or didn't resemble the arcade ports consumers expected. The company was sold to Jack Tramiel, who restructured Atari and relaunched the 2600 as the Atari 2600 Junior with a smaller size, price point, and more modern look, looking similar to the Atari 7800, hoping to compete with new video gaming giant Nintendo. Even still, with the 2600 being almost 10 years old, with outdated graphics and sound, and the 5200 and 7800 systems not doing much better respectively, the Atari 2600 would still live on with new games being released up until 1992, with titles like Clax, until finally being discontinued on January 1st, 1992. Now that we've taken a brief look at the console's history, let's take a look at the iconic system and games that would change gaming as we know it forever. Alright, so I've got my Atari 2600 all set up here, and I'm going to show you guys everything that you would get with a original 4-switch. This is not the heavy 6er 2600 console back in the mid-80s. I'm not quite sure what year this is. This is probably between 78 to 80. So we'll go over everything that comes with it. We'll take a look at a couple of games. Mainly Combat and Pac-Man, so I can show you the 2 different launch titles that came with the system, where Combat was the first up until around 1982, 1983, and then Pac-Man became the pack-in title with, pun intended, with the Atari 2600, and consequently was a big contributor, if not the only contributor really, in my opinion, to the video game crash of 1983. So we've got Q*bert and Pac-Man here. They're going to help me out. They're going to observe and, drink some RC Cola and watch everything as I get it set up. So now let's take a closer look at the system, everything that you would have gotten with it, and let's set it up. All right, so this is the 2600 unit itself. It's, oddly enough, a fairly simple but fairly complicated game console. Now, you only have 4 switches on this version here, and that's because in the 6-switcher, you had a left player 1 and player 2 game select and reset button independently. So mainly you have the power button, or on-off switch here, your TV type for color and black and white, and black and white might seem a little out there, but I remember on my first TV that I got, I was using a black and white TV before I got a color TV, and that wasn't even in the 70s or 80s. That was in the early 90s. So black and white TVs were more prevalent than you'd realize. And then up top here, of course, VCS, Video Computer System. You have the cartridge slot. This is the game select switch, which you would push down because a lot of games would have multiple modes on the cartridge. And then the reset, which some games you needed to do that to start the game, and other games you would just push the button and the game would start. And on the top of the console here, we have the input, where it's labeled for the left controller. We'll flip that around in just a second. You have your difficulty switch for A is for expert and B is for novice. You have your input for your power. Then you have your player 2 difficulty switch, A and B, and the input for the right controller, and the channel 2-3 switch. Now the console has a really unique design that's very, very iconic and easily recognizable. You have all these interesting little fins and slots that really give it a very unique aesthetic. Of course, you have the wood grain, like that dark brown finish that goes around all the controls up at the top. And then, of course, iconically enough, the Atari logo and the wood grain on the front that, I think pretty much everybody is familiar with this style. And I think this was made primarily because in the 70s and 80s, you were selling people... it took a while before this really got to be known as a, home gaming system, and it was just... Most of your furniture had this wood grain, like a lot of your electronics, your stereo, it all had that wood paneling. So they were trying to get people to take it seriously, and that it was more like a nice luxury piece of electronics to bring into your home to complement, with your current style and theme of the 70s and 80s. So I think that's why, we saw it like this, and a ton of Pong consoles and other things like that were also the same. So let's take a look at the bottom. And you can see this has just some information on the bottom here. Serial number, different stuff like that. And let's take a look at the reverse side of the console here. And there we go, you get a better look now at, this is the channel 2-3 switch. You have your 9 pins, which these can actually take a Sega Genesis controller. And the D-pad's much easier to use than the joystick, but personally myself, I like the joystick because it's a more original feel. You have your difficulty switches, with just one that is broken off over the years for the player 2, for A and B. Most games are set to B by default. You have a very unusual power supply that this uses, which is a 3.5, kind of like an audio jack to AC adapter port, which is very unique. And then the player 1 controller port. And so speaking of the controllers, let's take a look at the controllers that came with the system. Now this, of course, is the iconic joystick. I mean, this is so iconic that even on some of your apps, like Google and stuff, like just when you're playing stuff and you see a logo for video games, you still see this controller. And back then, there weren't even a lot of controllers that had buttons. So this is your 8-way diagonal joystick. It's very rough in the hands for long periods of play because the corners really dig into your hands, and the joystick is really, really stiff. So not very comfortable to use. And also, if you're left-handed, this was just not... They did not have left-handed players in mind at the time. Overall, it is a good joystick. I mean, it controls really well. I personally like it, but my personal favorite that I use if I'm not using the Sega Genesis pad, this is called the Gem Stick. And this is just very nice and rounded. The joystick, it doesn't take very much to move the joystick, so there's not a lot of fatigue on your wrist when you're playing. It's extremely rounded, very, very light, so it doesn't really hurt your hand as much. The button's nice and soft to click, so this is my go-to joystick, but I do, I don't mind using either of them, but if I have a preference, I'm going to go with this 9 times out of 10, or a Sega Genesis pad. And then these are the paddle controllers. Now, they had driving controllers as well, but those were sold separately for different games, like Night Driver and stuff like this, but this was for if you wanted to play games like Pong, or Super Breakout, and they have a almost 360-degree turning radius, and you have just the one button on there, and you just plug these into, well, some games you would plug them into the right controller port and then still have a joystick in the left controller port depending on the game. Like I believe Spy Hunter is set up like that. And then other games you would just put these into the left controller, which would be the player 1, and then each player would take one pair of the paddles. And a lot of the paddle games, they play really well, and they're really excellent. There's a lot of excellent, great paddle games. I just wish that they would make, like with consoles like the Flashback and stuff, they really should make a Bluetooth pair of the paddles, and that would just be awesome, because those consoles are great if you don't like going to all this setup with the older systems. So if you like something more modern, I personally recommend the Flashbacks, but the original 2600 or 7800 or whichever way you're going to go, they're great systems to definitely experience. Also with the system, you would have gotten this wonderful little torture device, and this is a switch box. So I'll show you guys how this hooks up, and a lot of video game systems and computers had this back in the 70s and 80s. I know our first system that I had when I was growing up, the Atari 800 XL, which if you haven't seen my review on that yet, definitely make sure and go check that out. So for anyone who doesn't know or just isn't from that generation, these would screw in on the back, and then you would have a cable you'd plug into the side, and then you would switch this between TV and computer. And actually, I haven't tested this one in particular out yet, so I'm not sure if this still works, but we'll give it a shot and we'll see if it works. There's definitely a much easier mode than that, and that's this handy-dandy little thing. And this is a female-to-male composite to coax adapter. Radio Shacks aren't really around anymore, so we're used to be able to pick them up, but they're very easy to find on eBay. Maybe even possibly Best Buy, Walmart. They're pretty common, and you just screw this into like where you put your cable in. Then the other end just pops in, and you know, very, very simple. Because the as I'll show you in just a second here. Let me just put that down for just a second. So now this is the AC adapter. This is the power adapter, and then we'll take a look at the port as to what that looks like when it goes into, there we go. This is what that looks like when it goes into the system. So it looks just like a headphone jack, except it is only for electricity. So you definitely do not want to try plugging this into like an iPod or something on your phone. That's going to be a bad result. And so now this is the cable here that comes out of the back of your Atari. And now this kind of looks like you would think like, oh, it's just composite. I can just plug this into my yellow inputs or things like that. That absolutely will not work. You have to have this into some type of an adapter in order for it to convert the RF signal into like channel 2 or channel 3. Systems like the Famicom and stuff, well, like many systems use this, but there's very few systems that use this exclusively, because like the Nintendo had you know, composite AV outs. So this, you have to have something to switch up that signal. And what you would do with that is you would just, that would just go on like that. If I can get it with one hand here. And then that screws into the back of your TV, and then you can play your Atari very easily. So now we'll go ahead and we'll get this set up. So first things first, we'll take a look at that a little bit later. Let's actually, we'll plug in the power supply here. So now that plugs back in here into this little outlet there. All right, we'll move Solaris out of the way there. And now let's take the AC adapter. All right, and then we'll plug that in there. And that's kind of weird because the way that it's kind of like upside down because of just the way that it's designed. All right, and now I'm actually going to plug in the RF adapter, and we'll see how this works. That's why I got my screwdriver here let's see if we can get this working. Okay, so first things first, I'm going to take and I'm going to plug in the out from the Atari into this side here, and I believe it needs to be set to TV. I'm not sure. And then we're going to take and we're going to turn the TV around. Okay, and then back here, that's where you have your little prongs where these things have to go. So we'll set them up. Okay. And then just screw them in one at a time. And now the problem with these is if you didn't screw them in tightly or they didn't have a good connection, you'd have a really blurry connection when you're playing your games. Alright, so now we've got everything hooked up. Hopefully that's in the right orientation. Now let's take our we'll take our joystick. We'll plug in the original joystick here. Okay. And we'll just plug that in right there. And now let's just pop in. We'll pop in combat here. Now this is what I was talking about, how you have the different modes. This is for your select switch. So 1 to 5 is tank, 6 to 9 is tank pong, 10 to 14 is invisible tank, 15 to 20 is biplane, 21 to 27 is jet fighter. So they would a lot of times advertise on the cartridges like 27 games in one, because there's all these different modes. And these are the ones that were originally released from 77 to 79. You can tell because they have this plain black label. So these were all Atari first-party made games. So let's put that in there. We'll set this to channel 3 because I find that channel 3 usually has the best reception when playing games. And all right, let's turn on the TV here. There we go. So we got power. Let's turn this on. And let's see, I don't know if this is set up correctly, so... seems like it's trying to get a signal through. But I don't know if that RF switch actually works. Nope, does not look like the RF switch works. So instead, we're just going to hook up the other little cable and we'll get a much better result out of that. So this is very easy, a heck of a lot easier than the RF adapter. All right, so we're just going to take the little coax adapter here, and there we go. Put that in there. Now let's flip the TV around again. And now this is much easier. All you do is just screw this in. And hopefully there won't be any interference from that RF switch now that I have them both plugged in. I don't think so, but I guess we'll find out. Alright, so now that we've got that set up, let's turn this back on. Now let's power on the Atari. And let's see, might be on the wrong channel. There we go, and the black and white switch was on by accident. As you can see, black and white combat. There we go. So now that I've got this set up, let's play some combat. Alright, so now I've got combat in, we got it turned on. I got my joystick here, so I'll show you how this all works. So once you got your cartridge in and turned on, you got it set to the right channel. You can do a couple of things. I mean, of course, make sure you got it set to the right TV, black and white, or color. You can do your game select, which that will go through the different types of combat that you can play. I don't believe that the original combat had any one-player modes. I might be mistaken, because I never really played this much growing up. And, well, also, I didn't even have an Atari 2600 growing up. I had an Atari 800 XL as my first system, so... But I don't think that it does. But, yeah, there's the, the biplane modes. Then you have, like, the spaceships and stuff. So anyway, let's go ahead and, let's just play some regular combat. So now you just hit the game reset button. And yes, that horrible noise you hear in the background, that's, I guess technically supposed to be, like, war music or something. God only knows. That will make your ears bleed. But it's very simple. Each player has a joystick, and they control a little tank on the screen here. And then I believe it's the first to get to 21 points wins. So you just drive your tank around, and you try to avoid each other. And I kind of like the tank noise that the treads make. I think that's kind of neat. And then you just want to line yourself up. And then you blow the other guy away. So while this seems really primitive by today's standards, it was actually pretty neat. I mean, this was a pretty neat little game to be packed in with the 2600. And they figured that most people were usually playing with their friends and family anyway, so that was the appeal of this. Let's try a couple of the other different modes. Now this is one where you have different obstacles, so this is a little more interesting. You have little barriers and obstacles to drive around. Same basic principle though. Now one thing I have to tell you, if you were expecting good graphics with the Atari 2600, yeah, might be in for a little bit of a reality check there. There are some games that have really much above better graphics than this. But, considering for 1977 or 1978, when all you had before was Pong, this actually isn't that bad. So let's see, let's move on to something else. Yeah, you got another more complicated maze there. Let's see. Now, this is one of the ones with the planes. Yep, there we go. Now, this one's always kind of goofy to control. So I believe your controls are inverted. I can't get myself to level out here. So this, it seems like the controls are reverse, which is unbelievably confusing. But same basic principle. And now let's check out the space game. There we go. And it's basically the same thing as the airplanes. Now, this is a little easier to move. This is more... I don't know why in the world they had the airplanes set up like that. Just makes no sense. Slow down, guy. I'm never going to be able to shoot you. Bam! There you go. So this is basically... This is combat. This was your Super Mario Brothers, let's say. that came with the system at the time, and you know, not bad. So now let's take a look at the other Pac-In game that would have come with the system, and that's Pac-Man. Okay, so this is the iconic Pac-Man cartridge that came packaged around 1982 with every Atari 2600 that was sold, and that was because Atari thought that everybody was going to want their own home version of Pac-Man, so therefore everyone would want an Atari. They produced, I believe, initially 2.9 million cartridges because they expected to sell 2.9 million Atari 2600s. Now, this is the all-time best-selling 2600 game for the console. It's 7.9 million at the end of 1983. But if you haven't ever seen my video, I did a video on the history of Pac-Man. This is nothing like what anybody expected. You know, and of course, even the artwork on the front, if you look at the box, I have a box for it somewhere, it leads you to believe, like, hey, cool, this is going to be just like what you played in the arcades, right? Well, I'll let you be the judge of that. We'll turn on the TV. Let's put in Pac-Man. Let's see, is this going to be an arcade classic? And, okay, first off, what in the hell is that? That maze does not look anything at all like Pac-Man. This was developed in 1981. I believe this is only like developed in like between like 2 weeks to like 3 months. It was very, very quickly developed, very, very rushed, which is why this game was just hated by so many people. People returned their consoles. As you'll see in a minute or two, the ghosts, you can barely tell the colors of them. Pac-Man looks very strange. The maze is strange. Like, you can barely even see the ghosts when they're moving around, and this does not play anything like Pac-Man, like what you would expect. So let's start the game here, and I believe this one you don't have to hit the reset button for. We'll just go ahead and we'll hit the button on the controller. And yeah. You have the tunnels, but they're totally on the wrong side. And with the ghosts, like, they flicker so much, you can't really tell when they're going to turn back to normal or when you can eat them. Now, I'm not, totally terrible at this game, but then again, I have played it. Unfortunately, I have played it before. And, Pac-Man, he just looks bizarre. I mean, at least he does, he does have eyes, and his face changes directions, when you're, changing directions. But it's just a really, really bad port of Pac-Man. And, if you had played it in the arcade and you got this home and you got your Atari, suffice it to say, you would be pretty darn upset to be like, what the heck is this? This is not the Pac-Man that you know from your local arcade. And oddly enough, I will say there are worse games on the 2600 than this, but they're hard to find. I mean, there's really not many that are as bad as this. Then you have like the fruit that appears in the middle. I mean, in only like 2 weeks to a couple of months, like they actually, they almost tried. That's the best thing I can say. I mean, I don't know if I can really say that it could have been worse, but man, it's definitely bad compared to what it's supposed to be. At the end of each level, you get an extra life when you clear a stage, but yeah, so just imagine this being the Pac-In title with Atari, and if Nintendo had something like this, it would have never gotten off the ground. It would have just... They would have gone bankrupt. So there you go. There's Pac-Man. All right, so now for something a little bit different to showcase the paddle controllers. I got one of my favorite paddle games of all time for the Atari 2600, and that's Breakout. This is an awesome game. And I mean, there's still stuff like this you can get for your phone today. Arkanoid's basically the same thing, except just more advanced. And it's fantastic. It's great. So this was a later version cart with the 2600 Junior that would have came out because of the orange label. Most ones were just like the plain black label. But let's turn that on. We got our paddle controllers hooked in there, and let's play some Breakout. All right, we got our Breakout on. Let's hit the reset button. Let's play some Breakout. Now this, you have, the paddle controllers can sometimes be a little bit fidgety over the years. Thankfully, this is working pretty well. Sometimes they can jitter a little bit when you're playing. And all you do is you hit this button here, and that'll serve the ball. And unlike some other versions of Breakout, the higher up in the colors that you hit, the faster the ball's going to go. But this is a really, really super fun game. Like, once you get up into the yellow and the orange, it really gets hard. But it's such a great game. And I love the sounds, as simple as they are. They're just very clean. Everything about it's really, really clean. And just a great arcade. Well, yeah, actually, our arcade port. I forgot this actually was an arcade title first. But yeah, just a fantastic game. Super Breakout is just as good, except in a lot of modes you have two paddles instead of the one. Like, not like the paddle that I'm using, but the on-screen one is what I mean by that. And yeah, this was a very creative take on like Pong. Like originally this is basically just Pong, and then like rethought like, okay, what else can we do with Pong to make money? And then you come up with a game like this. Like, oh, cool. Why don't we do something where you have to break these bricks? And there's been so many good clones of this afterwards. And there you go. There's Breakout. An awesome game for the Atari 2600. All right, so now that we've already taken a look at the terrible port of Pac-Man, let's take a look at something that came along just a few years later with Ms. Pac-Man, and just see the difference in quality when you don't rush the game, and just how much different and how much more improved that the game can be, and that the original Pac-Man didn't have to be what it was. Let's turn this on here. And now this is a game where you do not have to hit the reset button. You can just hit the button on the controller. But first off, just look at the screen. I mean, sorry, I know there's a little bit of a glare on my TV, but you can actually see the ghosts. You can see Miss Pac-Man with her bow on her head. The maze looks like the regular maze. You have the cherries bouncing around the screen. You can identify the power pellets. The ghosts, when they're not blue, we can see, Pinky or Clyde, whichever one that's supposed to be. They're all the correct colors. And this actually looks like a Pac-Man title. Look at this little intro screen. Look at just how much better this is. And I haven't even started playing the game yet. This is just... It just goes to show what some care and concern into a title can make a difference. And if this had been released first instead of Pac-Man, you probably would have never even seen the crash of 1983. So with all that little history out of the way, let's play some Miss Pac-Man. You got a good little intro comes on, very recognizable. Good sound effects for eating the pellets. Also good sound effects for when the ghosts turn blue. How it kind of speeds up to let you know that your time is running out. And Then you have the tunnels, too, which slow down the ghosts. So everything is here. And I mean, when you consider... You know, I'm not sure if Ms. Pac-Man was a 4 kilobyte cartridge or a 2 kilobyte cartridge, but regardless, for the time period, it's just... I mean, just look at the difference as to what can be done. Oh, I got myself trapped there. But this is a game, I still consistently play this game all the time, even though there's better versions of this Pac-Man out there, just because this one is still just so much fun. And even though the graphics aren't the best, it's just a fun version for the Atari 2600. And just awesome. So, an absolutely stellar title, Ms. Pac-Man for the Atari 2600. If you own a 2600, definitely pick this game up. And of course, another classic, if you're talking Atari 2600, you have to be talking Pitfall with Activision's classic Pitfall and Pitfall Harry, the first platformer that really ever came out, ever. There'd be no Mario Brothers, there'd be no anything if Pitfall and Pitfall Harry never came out. So let's check this out. Now in Pitfall, you do have 3 lives, represented up here by these 2 little dashes, but it's more about the timer. Now you're in the jungle, and what you're trying to do is trying to rack up as many points as you can before the timer runs out to achieve the highest score possible. You have 2 different parts of the world. You have the above world section, and then the below subworld indicated with the ladder and the brick walls, so they can stop you. So you got to plan out your plan of attack through trial and error to try to find out the best path to get all the treasures before the time runs out. So we'll just go ahead and hit the fire button here and get started. And now, you don't really lose health, but you do lose points if something hits you. You'll hear that noise, like you got these logs that are rolling by. And then here you can, this is how you can climb up and down below. And some of these little things like here are shortcuts to different areas. Now, I don't think I'm going to be able to jump over that guy. Yeah, usually they have to be facing the other way if you want to jump over the scorpions. Can be done, but hard. I should not have come down here. Oh no. Crud, and there's a wall. Okay, well that was a very short game of Pitfall. Let's do that one more time. Instead of going down there, take my normal route. And yeah, this game is just iconic for, you know, very early beginning platforming, and it's pretty challenging. But not just challenging, you know, it's also very fun. And, you know, there's, you know, pits and stuff, vines that you have to swing across. Of course, the iconic alligators, crocodiles, what have you here. And these always give people problems. So many times you're going to end up falling in and... You know, they're gonna eat you, even though they didn't eat me that time. I fell into the swamp. Ah, got me again. See, if you're off by just a hair, they'll snack on you. There we go. Those darn logs are such a pain. Let's see if we can make it to our first treasure here. Oh no! Oh well, anyway, so that's Activision's Pitfall, and it's a fantastic game. If you're getting an Atari 2600, I definitely recommend you add this to your library as well. Now we have Space Invaders. Now this was licensed to Atari, I believe, in 1980 or 81, and this was really their big game that really made the 2600 take off, because it was such a smash hit in the arcades. And once this got ported to home systems, everybody loved it, and this is what really sold the 2600 and just took off. This is the Tele-Games version made by Sears, because Sears had a license to produce the Atari under the Tele-Games name. So let's go ahead, we'll pop this in. Let's play some Space Invaders. And now this is the difference of a, an arcade port done right instead of Pac-Man. And for the most part, aside from the graphics being a little worse, like it looks very, very similar to the original arcade Space Invaders. I mean, granted, the Atari 800 version honestly looks the closest to the original Space Invaders, but I mean, everything's here. You have the UFOs that fly by. You have the little forts or whatever that block you from getting hit by the other aliens. And this is just a really good port. I never really liked Space Invaders myself too much because of this part here. When they're going 100 million miles an hour, I have a hard time hitting them, and then if they get to the ground, you lose, so... I do like Space Invaders enough, but it's never been one of my favorite games, but still, it's definitely a classic for the Atari 2600. Obviously an arcade classic, and really, really well done here. So if you're going to have an Atari 2600, I totally recommend picking up Space Invaders. Now, I couldn't rightfully talk Atari 2600 if I didn't pull out Yar's Revenge. This is a great first-party Atari video game, probably your first shoot 'em up that ever came on the video game market, aside from River Raid, and just a fantastic title. So let's pop this in, and let's play some Yar's Revenge. All right, 1981 Atari. Now, you are the Yar here. You're like a little race of like fly people, and I can't remember. This is a Kotile, the Kotile, I believe. So that is like this alien. I don't know what it is. Some type of ship or something, or I think maybe the little thing in the middle, that might be the Kotile. I don't remember. But so what you have to do here, let's start the game up, is you control your little Yar here, and you have to avoid that little this little dot right here that floats around the screen. Now you can be in this section, which is actually the game's programming code. This is the negative zone, and it can't hit you, it can't hurt you. Although that still can hurt you if it hits you in here. But you generally want to try to avoid it. Now there's two things you can do. You can either shoot away at the protective coating that's protecting the enemy here, or you can just kind of eat away at it. And then you want to, I did that kind of fast there, but you want to touch the little the enemy there, and that'll bring in your laser cannon to try to destroy it. So usually I try to kind of stay at a distance and then move in. And that darn little cursor thing, boy oh boy, is that a pain in the butt. And just check out that crazy, that's all the game's code that comes up there. It's so crazy, so wild. And this is a really, really challenging game. A lot of fun. You gotta be careful though, because you can get hit by your own missile and that'll take you out. But this was a really creative and challenging game for the time. And really fun. Oh, almost got him. Let's see if we can get him one more time. Ooh, so close. No. Come on. Oh, man, got myself instead. Come on, you stupid little cursor, get out of the way. Ah! That darn thing wasn't there, it wouldn't be a problem. Oh, come on, that just missed. Whatever. We got him twice anyway. So again, if you have an Atari 2600, absolutely pick up Yar's Revenge. Now, once again, I couldn't be talking Atari 2600 if I wasn't talking about Adventure, another fantastic first-party Atari game. And you wouldn't have any Zelda, you wouldn't have any RPGs today if Adventure had never came out. This is your first very basic RPG, fantasy kind of story game that ever came out. It's very basic, very simple. But as you'll see in a minute, this would set the standard for any type of RPG game to come. So let's play some Adventure. Alright, so now as you can see, it's extremely basic. You're just this little yellow square that you control. That's our hero. But you can actually pick up and interact things. There's this castle here. It's like, oh, I can't get in. Oh, I need the key. So we'll go in. Yellow key for yellow castle. You know, since there wasn't any text or dialogue like that. And you'd think that's just an arrow, but that's not. That's your sword. So one thing I have to say that I didn't say before, if you had an Atari 2600, you have to have a heck of an imagination to play these games. And then, bam, we'll get the dragon. And now we've got the key for the Black Castle. And I've only beaten this once. Half the stuff I forget. Oh no! Get away, dragon! Help! Ah, you jerk. I have been defeated. Darn you, let me go. Alright, well, game over. But it seems really basic and simple. But, you know, it's one of the few games that has a very basic ending, and, you know, some puzzle-solving elements, and just a really great first-party Atari title. And, again, if you have a 2600, you're planning on getting one, definitely pick up Adventure. And finally, if I'm talking Atari 2600, I absolutely have to be talking E.T. the Extraterrestrial. And most people think this is the game that caused the, you know, great video game crash of 1983. I think it had a little bit to do with it, but I'd have to disagree. This game, don't get me wrong, it is terrible. I do not like this game. It is playable. It's not very much better than Pac-Man, if it is at all better than Pac-Man. But it's certainly not one of the worst games for the Atari 2600. There are worse games than this to play. This just requires some patience, reading the manual, and you know, you'll see it for yourself in just a minute here. So let's go ahead. We'll play some E.T. So, I mean, not bad as you start out. I mean, you have E.T.'s recognizable face on the screen, the logo, you know, the E.T. song from the movie. So that's not bad considering the Atari 2600 how limited it is. The fact that it could do that was pretty impressive. So we'll go ahead and we'll start the game. And you come down in your spaceship, and now you have numbers down here. That's your health. So every time you move around, you lose health. And you can hit the button to raise your neck and change screens. And this is what happens a lot. You fall down into pits. And let's see, you can... There we go. That tells you that there's you're looking for pieces to build your phone to phone home. And then when you raise your neck and you hit the button, something will glow in a pit, and that'll let you know, like, oh, here's a part to the phone. And then you have these scientists. Ah, boy. You always keep falling back into these pits. The scientists and federal investigators that are after you. This can be such a pain trying to line yourself up. Yeah, see? So you can imagine, like, if you were growing up in the 80s and you got this for Christmas, graphically, like, it really doesn't look that bad, but it's frustrating. Oh, now the scientist took me back and reset some of my darn progress. Jerk. Oh. Now see, without reading the manual, it's unbelievably confusing. And once your health goes all the way down to 0, Elliot will come back and revive you. You have 2 lives. And there's the federal agents. And you can run off here. These are M&Ms that you can pick up that will help to restore your health. Nothing here. Whoop. And there's also a spot on the screen. That's your landing spot there. There's a little square to where you have to go once your phone is all built. And this is a little Easter egg. If you come down here and do your little neck thing, it will a flower will regrow, just like in the movie. So that's kind of neat. Got a little hidden Easter egg there. But yeah, see, like you can't see what's on the next screen, so it gets very frustrating. I won't say it's like the worst game of all time, but it's certainly not a very good game. And it can take a while to beat and to play, especially, see, like right there, like I'm nowhere near that pit. I'm just trying to grab this little M&M, and then I'm still falling in. There's nothing here. And, yeah. Well, so that's ET for the Atari 2600. I say you be the judge of that. I do think it's terrible, but I don't think it's the worst game ever made for the system. And then one last thing I wanted to take a look at here. These are the boxes that, you know, that the Atari 2600 games would come in. This is a later release, I believe, because a lot of the 2600 Juniors, they had the red labeling on the carts. This is for Solaris. And so, yeah, like a lot of them, like you didn't really know what kind of a game you were getting. And this is also what contributed to the crash. Because, you know, they would show like screenshots, but like it really wouldn't explain the game very well. But just a quick look of what you would have gotten inside of the box, you know, when you would have gotten a game, and how it would have compared to what the box, you know, offered. And I think Solaris, even though it's confusing, it's definitely fun, and I don't even know what I'm doing. So, a cool game. Alright guys, that is going to do it for my retrospective on the Atari 2600. Hope you guys enjoyed taking a look at the Atari 2600 today with me at this historic, iconic console from the late 70s and early 80s. I think that it's very iconic. I think it's an important part of gaming history that a lot of people kind of downplay or overlook. I mean, sure, some of the games are terrible. You don't understand how they work. The sound is awful. The music is awful. You know, they're boring. The graphics are terrible. You know, but so many games got their start here. From Legend of Zelda to Final Fantasy to Super Mario Brothers. You know, you can all trace it back to like Pitfall. You can trace it back to games like Adventure or like Centipede and Galaxian, stuff that you're playing on a home console back in the early 70s and the 80s, long before Nintendo ever came out, and it helped to popularize home gaming and home cartridge gaming, and I think that's really important, and I think that's why the Atari 2600, while as outdated and inferior as it seems today, is such an important piece of the gaming culture and the tapestry of video gaming that we know today. So again, I hope you guys enjoyed taking a look at the Atari 2600 system with me today, and I'll see you back here again sometime soon for another video. Take care.
Hey guys, if you liked the video that you just watched, don't forget to hit that subscribe button down below, and you can follow me at Facebook at King of Retro or Twitter at #8ByteBrian. See you next time.